looking at part B of the build-up to World War II. Let's begin by talking about how the face-off between European nations and also in the Pacific with Japan will begin. Other European nations, because of the instability in different regions, will start to become under the control of dictators, just as Italy and Germany was. In the Pacific, Japan will be taken over by an oligarchy or ruled by the few, and that oligarchy is militant leaders. And they'll start to become very aggressive in the Pacific. They'll invade Manchuria, which is an area of China. They'll invade places in the Southeast Asia, and they'll also look to get islands in the Pacific. Mussolini will invade Ethiopia as part of his strategy to strengthen the Italian mindset and the Italian military. He will invade Ethiopia, and he will go up against a group of people that is fighting with spears, outdated weaponry. They're on horseback, and they're going against Italy, which has airplanes, bombs, machine guns, armored vehicles, tanks, and they're very outmatched. So Mussolini and Italy easily win that. At the same time, a man by the name of Francisco Franco is looking to be a fascist dictator in Spain. And because of this, he goes to Mussolini and Hitler and tries to garner support from them. And so Hitler and Mussolini will support Francisco Franco as he tries to take over Spain. However, the opponents to Franco went to places like Britain and France and asked for their help, and they did nothing. So Franco, with the help of Hitler and Mussolini, is able to easily win control of Spain. Now, Hitler begins to start to occupy certain areas, and he does things that go against the Versailles Treaty. The first thing that he does is he increases the size of the military. The Versailles Treaty has said that they were limited to the size of their military. Well, he starts to build that up and completely ignores the Versailles Treaty, and there's nothing that any country can do because there's no statement as to what to do if something like this would happen. So he's able to do that. The next thing that he goes and he occupies an area of former Germany that's full of Germanic people called the Rhineland. And the Rhineland has a lot of Germanic people, but it was created as a buffer between Germany and other nations. And so he marches in there. He's lauded as a hero. There are parades. They welcome him very easily into that. And this happens because Britain and France were using a policy called appeasement. And appeasement is when you give in to an aggressor to keep the peace. Hitler and Germany were basically being like a bully, and Britain and France were just trying to ignore him so that he wouldn't do anything else. That's appeasement. Now, what's going to happen is Hitler's going to team up with Italy and Mussolini, and they're going to have the Rome-Berlin Conference. And there they sign the Rome-Berlin Axis. And Axis is where two lines meet at a point. Okay? And so these two nations are going to meet at this point, and they're going to be known from then on as the Axis powers. And then later, Japan will join the Axis powers. Now, European nations will use appeasement to make concessions for peace. So they're giving in to make peace, and they're going to make concessions. So they're going to give up something so that hopefully Hitler wouldn't do any more. But in doing this, he keeps taking and taking, and they knew nothing and nothing. The U.S., in the meantime, wants to isolate itself, trying to get out of the Great Depression. They're struggling with that. They don't want to be involved in a war that would bring them into further debt and further issues and further problems. What is Hitler trying to do? Well, his whole goal is to create what he calls the Third Reich, or the new German Empire. He said that there were historically two other areas of German superiority, and he was creating the Third Reich, and that was to unite the German people and to create the greatest German empire that ever lived, and hopefully the last empire that would ever be of Germany. And so what's one of the first things he does? After he takes the Rhineland, he goes and he annexes Austria. The Treaty of Versailles said that Austria and Germany could not become allies through an alliance. So Germany just annexes it. They make Austria a part of Germany. And in doing so, they make the people of Austria a part of Germany. And the Austrian people allow Hitler and his army to go in there peacefully and take over. And now, having seen this, Hitler takes his eyes to the east in the Sudetenland, which is an area of Czechoslovakia. Again, it was created as a border or a buffer between Germany and Czechoslovakia. He will go in there and he will want to take it. Britain and France are essentially going to do nothing. But this time they do nothing through a conference. And this conference is called the Munich Conference. Now, this is a peace conference between Britain, France, Italy, and Germany. And here at this conference, they give in to Hitler. And they allow him to take the Sudetenland. And in exchange, they say Hitler will have no further action. Now, the Prime Minister of Great Britain was pretty naive at this time. His name was Neville Chamberlain. And he comes back to the British people and he says, I believe that there will be peace for our time. And he couldn't be any wrong. Okay? A politician at that time named Winston Churchill, disagrees with Chamberlain and his policies of appeasement and his Munich Conference agreement to do that. He says Hitler is evil and he will continue to be evil and he will continue to take over and invade certain nations. And that's exactly what he does. Because less than 6 months later, Hitler will take Czechoslovakia from the Sudetenland. Then he will go and he will take Albania, and now he looks to aim at Poland. Now, Britain and France, one of the reasons why they went to appeasement is because they had allied with Joseph Stalin and the Soviet Union. And so they figured they had a good alliance there that Hitler wouldn't do anything to bring all three of those powers into a war. But what they didn't know is that Hitler was also talking with Stalin. And in fact, Hitler had ultimately signed a non-aggression pact. And part of that non-aggression pact was that one of them invaded Poland, which was between Germany and the Soviet Union, that they would divide it up and they would split that country for their own uses. And so they're going to use that to work together and ultimately start World War II. Make sure you're keeping up with your Edmodo assignments. Make sure you're going to my website for any notes that you need and keeping up with the videos on the YouTube channel.